All right, happy Tuesday. True story, you guys. My lawyer, Noah, who's like, kind of famous in his own right by now, he came to town this past weekend for a baby shower. And when my 4-year-old son saw him, he was like, Noah. And then later on, he said, Noah is my best friend. I just wanted to point that out. My legal troubles are so extensive right now that my 4-year-old thinks that my lawyer is his best friend. That's how often we're seeing him. That's the level of sued I am currently in the world. But at least we're having fun. So welcome back to Candace. I got to start this episode by shouting out this person in the comments from yesterday's episode. You guys know I'm always creeping in the comments. I always want to know what you guys are thinking as we unpack all of this madness, but I really appreciated this comment. It reads, I'm a 41-year-old service plumber, and this is my guilty pleasure every day, watching the show. Shout out to all of the plumbers who watch this show. It does not need to be your guilty pleasure at all. My dad was a plumber, actually. I'm pretty handy. So I just wanted to say that comment made me very happy. All right, so where do we leave off? Many of you guys were very shocked yesterday as we unpacked among many other affairs, the Monochet affair, because there's so many court cases that Brigitte's legal advisor and former Minister of Justice, Eric Dupond-Moretti, felt that he needed to insert himself into. And seemingly, as he was inserting himself into these cases, it was never on behalf of the actual child victims of incest and rape, but rather their parents or the adults that were involved in those cases. And there's so much more. I got to tell you guys, there's so much more. I have been very honest and serious when I said to you guys, our Becoming Brigitte series barely scratched the surface. We left so much on the table because we didn't want to overwhelm viewers. It's just so sick and sadistic, and it's such a web. And I come back to this idea that the elites, who we should probably be just referring to as the depraved, are bored. I think they are bored with their power. Going back to that book, for those of you guys that are getting into our Epstein series, going back to that book that Donald Barr wrote, that fantasy book that was too much like real life, predicting the rise of Jeffrey Epstein, who he helped to rise. Going back to that book where he theorizes that these people, this colony, they're so corrupt, but they're bored with their power because they control everything. And you think about that in terms of our depraved elites, and the only thing that likely really excites them is the idea that they might get caught, right? They got to just get more and more extreme. They kind of have to flaunt it in our faces as if they're daring us to say anything, right? What are you going to do? The Olympics, like that? Yeah, we're doing this right in your face. What are you going to do? What can you do? We rule over you. And that's kind of the idea of installing Brigitte over France in general, because you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to install Brigitte over France with Emmanuel Macron. So many examples of that as I get into all of these stories. I can give you right now 2 more examples of that sort of public audacity, right? So one is just Tiffany. This is like a fun fact about Tiffany, if you will, if it was an American name. And remember, this is allegedly Brigitte's daughter. I'm showing you this family tree in case you're someone who's jumped onto this late. I know a lot of people are catching up to the series in Asia at the moment. But yeah, this is allegedly the real family tree. Brigitte Trogneau marries Andre Louis Ozier, and they have 3 children. People, they have 3 kids. They have 3 kids, right? And of the 3 children, Tiffany is the one that always speaks out and defends her quote-unquote mother. Now, would have been very easy, obviously, would have been for Brigitte to, at some point, just produce photos of her raising those 3 children. No, she can't do that, obviously. So instead, she just sues everyone who suggests that she didn't give birth or raise those 3 children. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Point is, regarding Tiffany, last year, she published a book, okay? And it's important to state that for a living, what Tiffany does is she is a lawyer. Now, do lawyers author books? Yes, sometimes. Those books tend to be nonfiction, right, in the category of nonfiction. But Tiffany last year decided to publish a book, I think for the very first time ever, and it's a fiction book, which she says was loosely inspired by real cases that she came across as a lawyer in the north of France. And this particular fiction book covers themes related to domestic violence and All right, you guessed it. Incest. Yeah, of course. Duh. Come on, you guys. The book is entitled Assise, and that I think that's a French word that also is a term that they use to describe their courts. And it's billed as a novel which explores the complex themes related to violence and trauma, particularly focusing on situations where the boundaries between the victim and the perpetrator are blurred. According to available descriptions, the book features characters such as Jeanne, who's a victim of incest, and Laura, who's accused of killing her partner, who's also her abuser. I mean, why not, right? Why not just add a fiction book to the mix for funsies? And it's, I guess, an irresistible theme everywhere in France when it comes to incest. It's like, okay, I'm a lawyer. I want to involve myself in cases related to incest. Okay, I'm a lawyer, Tefan, and she's like, I want to write a book, a fictional book, covering that same theme among other violent themes. What are we to make of that? I don't know. Let's move on, okay? I also wanted to unpack, because obviously now I'm looking into the cases that Brigitte brought more closely, as much as you can as an English speaker. France in general likes to keep things very private. Like, this is kind of their culture. Oh, you have no right to even ask questions. We're so polite. You shouldn't even ask questions pertaining to Brigitte's background. And something that Xavier Poussard pointed out to me is it's very interesting that the first case that Brigitte brought about against the journalist was for invasion of privacy. Like, that was the crime. Not saying that I was born a man, but the fact that you invaded my privacy. It really signals to you that they think that's enough, telling the public that you should ask no more questions because, you know, I even though I'm a public person that has a lot of power over and I can rule over you, I deserve some privacy. So anyways, looking through the recent appellate court case for defamation that Brigitte brought against and lost against Natasha Ray and Amandine Roy. And it was, of course, the natural expectation to the outside world that in order to sort of disprove this notion that Brigitte Macron at first lived as a man named Jean-Michel Trogneau and then became Brigitte, that Brigitte would just very easily show up to this case with her brother. Like, I'm going to show up with Jean-Michel Trogneau. This is my brother. We're here together. Please stop this nonsense, right? Common sense is that you allege that your brother is living, that he is breathing, and therefore the best defense would just be to bring him with you to prove that you are in fact two different people, okay? But at no point has Brigitte been willing to do that. At no point has Brigitte been willing to simply appear with her brother to shut down these rumors that she is him. So you go to the next obvious thing would be that Brigitte is going to shut down these rumors that aren't true by producing for the court pictures of you and your brother together growing up, maybe. Okay, he's not going to show up. He's a very private guy. He enjoys his privacy, but here are, like, you know, millions of photos of me and him growing up together, playing in the yard, right? That's my brother. I love him so much. And you can see, because there's so many photos, that we have existed throughout our lives as separate people. But no, Brigitte was unwilling or unable to do that either. So what did she present to the courts, the appellate courts, as definitive proof that she's not her brother? Well, she presented a voting card, okay? A voting card, which we have a photo of. I'm not kidding. The First Lady of France presented as proof that she is not Jean-Michel Trogneau, and Jean-Michel Trogneau is instead alive and apparently living an entirely different life, separate from her. An electoral card, which, by the way, of course, as you know, it's the same in America. Does not have a photo attached to it. It is also not considered an official, by any means, a stretch of imagination, is this an official form of identification. But she presented this as proof that they're totally different people because Jean-Michel Trogneau, as you can see by this photo ID card, he voted on June 9th in Amiens one year. And in that same year, Brigitte Macron voted in Le Touquet, like, you know, a separate town. So we're obviously not the same person, as you see, because the voting ID card is proof. You can tell by the stamps that we voted in two different locations. Aha! Trust me, bro, she's not a bro. Aha! They got us. And okay, that doesn't really feel like you got us at all. And so then I guess the court pushed more on this, and like maybe your lawyer should present an actual ID, a pictorial ID that is recognized as a legitimate form of ID. And they did. They produced an identification with a photo of Jean-Michel Trogneau, which I can tell you guys, it's the same Jean-Michel Trogneau. Remember, they sent us a screenshot of a video from the inauguration. And they said, this guy in the background is Jean-Michel Trogneau. This is it. This is what they sent us, like my legal team, as proof that he's totally alive. And so what they presented in court was this guy, a photo ID of this guy saying that he's Jean-Michel Trogneau. And curiously, that ID, though you could say is illegitimate because it was expired. It's an expired ID. It had been expired for 3 years, okay? And here's the most interesting part. This is what really has gotten people speaking about this. The photo ID expired specifically in April of 2022. And it's interesting because then they also presented a photo ID of Brigitte Macron. This is it. And coincidentally, Brigitte Macron's ID had been issued in April of 2022. So Jean-Michel Trogneau's ID expires in April 2022, and Brigitte Macron's ID is issued in April of 2022. Could be a coincidence. I don't know. We're definitely going to find out because we have a court case. But the broader point here is, where's your brother? Just bring him with you. Why doesn't this person want to sit under oath and say that he is your brother and that he's that person, the original Jean-Michel Trogneau, that's curiously missing, and that his face doesn't match when it's run against Chinese software and technology, that we're not getting a match here. We're getting a match that's you, that you're this little boy in the photo. Why does he want to just show up and put all of this to rest? Nobody knows, guys. Nobody knows. Now back to Eric Dupond-Moretti, because many of you wanted further details. We had sort of honorably mentioned that there was this transgendered individual that is currently making allegations. This is or was, forgive my lack of political correction here because all of this is very new, but his name was Joachim Son-Forget, because some of you guys in the comments are like, I couldn't look him up. Joachim Son-Forget. Forget is spelled like forget in English, okay? His story goes that he was adopted from Korea when he was a baby by a Frenchman, and that Frenchman's name is Bernard Forget. Very difficult, by the way, to find this information on the web. You can't even find this on Wikipedia. They cleaned the fact that this was his father off of his Wikipedia page, which is kind of amazing. But yes, Bernard Son-Forget was his father. His father was a bailiff of a town in northern France. But regarding, his adopted child, regarding Joachim, he kind of has this sort of similar background story to Emmanuel Macron. He was considered by the public to be sort of a savant, like this amazing, young, promising politician, a promising political career, at least he would have had ahead of him. Growing up, he received a master's degree in cognitive science. He received a doctorate in neuroscience. And then in 2017, still very young, he joined that early presidential campaign. Emmanuel Macron, when he ran, he established his own political party, which was called En Marche, right? And obviously we know they win. Macron then gets inaugurated in 2018. And Joachim Son-Forget decides, I'm going to run for a parliamentary seat, right? That's like their Congress. I'm going to run for parliament under Macron's new party. And he runs and he wins. And he wins in a very big way, by very big margins, by unseating a Republican. Then while he's in parliament, they sit him on the Foreign Affairs Committee. That's a big deal. He, in general, was just, like I said, seen as a very big deal. Like, this kid has got presidential potential. And in 2020, because he was making the rounds in the media, he announced on a talk show that he planned to run for president in 2022. And people loved that. And while he made that announcement, he said that he had the support of Alexander Benalla. Now, if you remember Alexander Benalla from an earlier episode, that's the Emmanuel Macron's, who he dressed up as he was the deputy secretary. I got to look that up real quickly. Anyways, he was in Emmanuel Macron's administration. First, he was a security guard. Then he was in Emmanuel Macron's administration. Then there was this huge Benalla affair because he was caught pretending to be a police officer while beating protesters, right? a little bit of a gangster in the orbit, very clearly, massive affair. So this kid is saying, yeah, I have the support of Alexander Manala. Joaquim is saying that. Then what we learn in the public is that his father, like I said, who's been conveniently cleansed from his social media, from his Wikipedia page, his father, Bernard Forget, was actually swept up earlier in a massive pedophilia scandal. Bernard Forget, while he was serving as a bailiff, was known for helping young people with social and academic difficulties, hence the reason maybe perhaps that he and his wife decided to adopt Joaquim from Korea. But it turns out that actually he was not helping those children, he was hurting them. He got sentenced initially to 10 years in prison for sexually assaulting several boys. And between the ages of 13 and 15 years old. 13 and 15, what is that, 14? Interesting age. And yeah, it's very difficult to find this story, but this is who his father is. Sentenced to prison, it says right there. And then he got 12 years on appeal. You know the story because it's so familiar. It happens all the time. I should just tell you right now who his lawyer was. His lawyer was, of course, Mr. Eric Dupond-Moretti. Because I guess nobody else is available or whatever for these sorts of cases. Of course, and he enters in representing Mr. Son Forget. Now, much has changed for Joaquim. Now he goes by Eva, and he decided to become Eva, said that he was suffering from gender dysphoria. You might imagine a lot could impact your psyche when you're being raised by an adoptive father who is committing sex crimes. I'm sure that would impact your psyche in a variety of ways. There are people in France, like I said, believe that he kind of had this similar Emmanuel Macron upbringing, this young Korean boy who was being intentionally groomed for a position of power. But now he's standing up to that entire ecosystem of power that once propelled him. And he is specifically calling out Eric Dupond-Moretti, as well as Eric Dupond-Moretti's former partner, legal partner at his firm. That guy's name is Antoine Vey. Antoine Vey, again, once the partner of Eric Dupond-Moretti, is currently facing charges of sexual harassment. He has been disbarred as an attorney. There are also allegations against Dupond-Moretti. And so Joaquim, now who goes by Eva, posted this onto Facebook regarding Antoine Vey and Eric Dupond-Moretti and what he believes they did to help. He's claiming that they did not help victims of pedophilia, instead helped the other people. He wrote this, and again, I am interpreting this from French, so we can show that post that he posted on Facebook that was in French, and here is the loose interpretation of that. He writes in part, Antoine Vey, Eric Dupond-Moretti's partner, was, along with Eric, the lead lawyer for Bernard Forget, my horrible adopted father. None of the victims of pedophilia were helped by them. He's referring to Antoine Vey, was also a lawyer for Air Cocaine. That's another massive scandal, which implicated Aymeric Chauprade and the Afflelou family. He continues, these people, and especially Mr. Chauprade, linked to activists from the National Front, came to destroy my family and my reputation, and I suspect several murder attempts were covered up by recipients of funds from the Moon sect linked to the UDC. I believe I have the missing evidence from Outreau and the facts involving Mr. Bayrou. He then goes on and writes, the now deceased Marielle de Sarney, Mr. Sarkozy, and his close friends, Emmanuel Macron and his family, a few well-known Dijon socialists, have allowed me to survive and serve until now. I curse these people who lived for so long in the north and east of France under false identities, supposedly protecting their status or that of their parents or grandparents following the never-ending trials of 1939 through 1945. The people whose false identities will be revealed have nothing to fear if they acted for the common good. I will file my application for admission to the bar shortly so that I can plead my case and those of the other innocent children. I apologize for the harm caused by the necessary protection for my comrades and girlfriends or their parents, often civil servants and career military personnel. Thank you. So he's saying a lot there. He's talking about a lot of political scandals that have happened recently in France. It all seems to be bubbling towards the surface, and he's calling out these people. What I found to be really interesting about that post is his, first and foremost allegations that they're operating under false identities, and that their claim is that they're protecting their families, dating back to things that took place between 1939 and 1945. That's a very specific timeline. It makes me think about the Epstein case and us going into who the Maxwells were, and my suspicion that a lot of these people laundered their names. As I've said, they've laundered their names following World War II. I don't think because they were the good guys. I don't think because they were doing the right thing. I think because they were in power and have maintained a lot of their power. And so it's very interesting that he's making this allegation, and he's saying that a lot of stuff has been happening in the north of France. And like I said, it all seems to be bubbling to the surface. It's just fascinating. There are just so many players that are involved. And I think this is why there is mass panic, because the entire world is paying attention to what's happening in France. The entire world is paying attention to what's happening with Epstein. And these people are depraved. And they are demented. And they, I think, have always been the bad guys throughout history and have seemingly gotten away with it by changing their names and changing their identities. We'll find out. I'm going to also tell you guys what my suspicion is regarding Brigitte Trogneau, because there's a lot of people. Where is the real Brigitte? I'm going to tell you what I think following a quick break. First, I want to remind you guys about our store. You can go to our website to support us, CandaceOwens.com. You can join our book club, but we have released more signed copies of my initial book, Blackout, so that's available on the website. Also want to tell you guys about Just Thrive, because the biggest health secret not talked about right now is that everything starts in your gut. Every day your gut is fighting a silent war against processed foods, work stress, toxins in the air that you breathe. When your gut is in trouble, your whole body feels it. Most probiotics don't work. 99% of traditional brands die in your stomach acid before they reach your gut. That's what makes Just Thrive spore-based probiotic completely different. Just Thrive is the only probiotic that is clinically proven to arrive 100% alive in your gut. It does something that no other probiotic can. It turns your gut into an antioxidant factory, which creates protective compounds exactly where you need them most. That means better digestion, healthy immunity, more energy, and easy weight management. You can take Just Thrive probiotic in the form of a capsule or berry-flavored gummy, from their award-winning probiotic to their full line of gut, immune, and brain health supplements. Just Thrive has been fighting to make Americans healthy again with science-backed solutions that you can trust. To join the gut health revolution and take control of your health today, just visit justthrivehealth.com and you'll save 20% if you use promo code Candace at checkout. You'll see the difference yourself, or you'll get a full product refund, no questions asked. Again, take control today with Just Thrive. That's justthrivehealth.com with promo code Candace today. Also, reminding you guys about Tax Network USA, because they proudly believe in freedom, resilience, and financial independence. And for a limited time, they are offering a 10% off all of their services. So if you're dealing with back taxes or you missed the April 15th deadline, you shouldn't wait, because the IRS is, in fact, stepping up enforcement very quickly. Penalties can add up quickly, up to 5% per month, maxing out at 25% of your total tax bill, just not for filing. That's on top of what you already owe. But there's good news, because Tax Network USA can still help you turn things around. So whether you're self-employed, you're running a business, or your books are a complete mess, their team knows how to cut through the chaos and find solutions that can work. Your consultation will be completely free. You can get ahead of the problem now. That way you'll avoid harsh penalties and wage garnishments. Take the first step by calling 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Candace. You may have missed the tax deadline, but you haven't run out of options, so let Tax Network USA help by calling 1-800-958-1000 or visiting tnusa.com/Candace. Okay, so this is my opinion. Opinion is protected speech, okay? For those of you who have watched the series, you understand the web. The story that emerges to me that makes the most sense, and I think a lot of people might agree with this, is that it is very clear that Brigitte Trogneau existed. It is very clear that she was, in fact, the sister of Jean-Michel Trogneau. And I think that if I am guessing what took place here, Jean-Michel Trogneau took Brigitte Trogneau's identity at some point. It's very obvious he kind of becomes his sister. That's what seems to be the most logical conclusion based off of everything. And that would explain, because it's too wild of a theory to think that all of the siblings, even though the children, pardon me, Tefan and her two siblings, yeah, they don't speak much, but if you would eventually speak out and say that is my parent or that's not my parent, but they're silent. And I think that their silence probably indicates that they are related to Brigitte in some way, right? So perhaps that's not their mother. I don't believe that is their birth mother. That is in the Élysée Palace right now, but it is somebody that they know and someone that they have been around their entire lives. Namely, that would be an uncle, right? Like Jean-Michel Trogneau, the original Jean-Michel Trogneau that we saw in that young photo from Amiens, I think is their uncle. So the question that people ask is, okay, if you're operating under that theory, what happened to the real Brigitte Trogneau? Based on everything that we know about Macron's parents, their involvement in the trans cause, trying to get IDs for transgendered individuals, fighting for trans rights, so to speak, based on what we know about Veronique, if you subscribe to the idea that Brigitte, before she became Brigitte, Jean-Michel Trogneau perhaps lived as Veronique. If you guys have not watched the series, you're going to be very lost right now. But for those of you that did, lived as a while as Veronique. Well, that was during a time when trans people could not become somebody else. So if you are wanting to transition and you're living in the 80s and you are not allowed to just become somebody else under the law, what are you going to do? You need to have somebody who is dead or dying. You have to kind of become part of a network of people that are willing to give IDs, right? That are willing to give you IDs. It's kind of Mimi Marchand, she was fashioning IDs, getting IDs. I mean, those stuff that she's being accused of is forgery and things of that nature. And so if we are to believe that, I do believe that Brigitte Trogneau, the real Brigitte Trogneau existed, it's plausible that Brigitte Trogneau got sick, that the real Brigitte Trogneau got sick and perhaps had a dying wish to help her brother, Jean-Michel Trogneau, who was living perhaps as Veronique, right? And knowing that, okay, well, he's never going to be allowed to live his life authentically. He's always going to be always going to be hiding and doing these sorts of things because this is just not a time where people are recognizing this transgendered identity. Well, what if she gifted her brother her identity? Here, this is not a thing yet. You can just become me. Okay, that's, again, we're surmising. There's no evidence that Brigitte Trogneau died. There's no evidence of that. I'm just saying that when I put all the pieces together and I look at all of the cast of characters and I think of the reason why Tefan would be the only person to speak out in the family about this stuff, well, Tefan's the youngest. Tefan would have the least memory. If this theory is correct or holds any weight, Tefan would not remember her birth mother as much as the other children were. They're a lot older than her, old enough to have real memories of their mother. And so they would be uncomfortable, perhaps publicly representing that this is my mother. They would be comfortable being around this person if all you've known is that this is your uncle. And maybe obviously at that time when your mother did this, there was no idea that person was going to become the first lady of France and then complicate matters even further. But that's what it feels like to me. It feels like to me that Brigitte Trogneau did her brother, the real Brigitte Trogneau, did her brother a favor and allowed him to become her. Again, that's my theory. While we're allowed to think, that is what I would posit. Be interested to hear what you guys think about that. Anyway, shifting gears here, what's been going around a lot right now is Zionists, these ultra-Zionists who have been so masked down in their evil, recognizing that they have lost the quote-unquote PR war. Not that this is a PR war. Nobody's fighting, having to lie or smear or getting attention by the media to say that what's happening in Gaza is wrong. But you've been seeing this occurrence of oh my gosh, what's going on? So many people dislike Israel. And a perfect example of that is Bill Ackman, who tweeted this. He tweeted, "True, the PR war is as important a war as the war on the ground. A media or social media lie that is not immediately rebutted with the facts becomes a truth, regardless of its falsity. Israel has repeatedly failed to tell its side of the story, and this has caused serious harm to Israel and Jews around the world. Netanyahu, you need to fix this now." Now, to be clear, he's replying to, I'm assuming he's replying in the context of something that may have been false that was published about Israel. But him trying to connect this to a broader point that, oh, this is why we're losing because we've got to debunk lies more quickly. No, that's not why you're losing. You're losing because you're up against the truth, okay? The problem that Zionists are having, the broader issue that you guys are having, is that you are defending evil. You are behaving like psychopaths, and it's caught up. Like, you're going around demanding people lose their jobs. You are pretending that people are not starving in Gaza. You are outright mocking at points, Zionists like Randy Fine in Congress, images of children that are starving, saying that they deserve that. And you can only behave like a sadistic, psychopathic, murderous individual for so long before the world takes notice. I think, again, this is just the way I'm reading the situation, but I think the world has taken notice that there's something fundamentally wrong with Zionism because it requires so many lies, so much hideous reinterpretation. The media that you've had the support of the Western media, certainly in America. It's like a Zionist enterprise, writing all of these articles, ignoring the deaths, ignoring what's happening in Gaza until this very point where it's gotten so bad they can't ignore it anymore. And you go, I don't understand why people don't like Israel. I don't understand why people are hating Israel. This is why. You guys have gone full mask down for the last 2 years. And it takes a special kind of sadistic, murderous mind to continually defend this and go, but what about October 7th? You're behaving like psychopaths, truly like psychopaths. You're just not aware of yourself. And it's just not normal. These headlines are just not normal. And we can go over some of these right now. I mean, you now have the patriarchs and the heads of the churches in Jerusalem who are issuing statements about what's happening. The settlers, the absolute gremlins and goblins who go in and are taking over territory. Nope, not paying for it, not by just taking over people's territory, burning their crops, killing their animals, killing their livestock to make it so that it's unlivable. And just going, we're going to take it, it's ours. Gremlins, goblins, literally, that's what you are. When you see these people, they are just the most despicable, debased individuals you could ever imagine. And to do this under the context of Holy Land, like we are chosen by whom? Satan? That's the only thing that makes sense. You have to be chosen by Satan to be doing what you're doing. And then to look at us and go, we're the victims. We're the victim. Didn't you see what happened October 7th when, conveniently Netanyahu ignored everything that was happening at the border as if he knew it was going to happen? And yeah, conveniently we killed a lot of our own people, but then we just went to the press and said, oh my gosh, look what happened to us. It's just like the Holocaust. And then we just committed a Holocaust. Yeah. More headlines. Baby dies following a cesarean delivery after a mother is killed in an Israeli airstrike. Yes, it's about a newborn baby who died. They tried to rescue his baby via cesarean, and now that baby has died. And you guys look at us and you go, why aren't you supporting Israel? I would literally rather saw off my own foot than support Israel ever again, by the way. Never supporting that demonic nation ever again. That's I am so off that train. It's crazy. I've learned way too much. And you guys really have done the best PR. I'm glad that you guys exist. I'm glad that you're chasing down college protesters, that you're trying to pass speech laws, that you have people like Randy Fine who are laughing at death and starvation because you ran the most effective PR campaign that you could have run for what that nation is. You won, I would say. You delivered in every way that you are supposed to deliver by just going full mask down. You often hear this word inhumane, right? They don't dehumanize. You dehumanized yourself. You proved that you have to not be a human to look at what is going on in Gaza and to try to spin it as necessary, as a necessary response to October 7th. That takes somebody that is something other than human to keep doing that. And that's what you've done, and that's what you're being, and I will never be able to unsee that like the rest of the world. That's why I say it's incumbent upon us now. These are our kids that are growing up. You may have been able to do it with Robert Maxwell's textbooks, raise generation people to think like I did. Like, oh my gosh, like we have to make sure that a Holocaust never happens. We have to support Israel. Nope. Now we are reading the books. We're learning about how you've executed this. You've blindfolded the entire world to what you are. And what I think you might be is possessed by a real demon. I'm Catholic. I believe in demons. And Netanyahu is very clearly a demon. And any person that supports him, like you are a part of a like totally demonic enterprise. And we're never going to be able to unsee that, okay? Another headline for you. A worst case scenario of famine is unfolding in Gaza. Yeah, we're aware. We've been aware of that for a long time. You tried to ignore that. Oh, it didn't happen. No, Hamas is stealing. Hamas, ISIS, all of these people are just so conveniently, these terror groups are so convenient in helping Israel expand its borders. We know that now. We're aware of these operations that you're running and constantly blaming it on Muslims, radical Muslims, that you're funding always, right? You just always happen to be funding, Israel happens to be funding these groups. We're aware of what you're doing in Armenia. You're killing Christians. You've always been killing Christians. And you've always been pointing the finger at Muslims. So everyone's awake to that now. You got a little bit more than a PR problem, Bill Ackman, okay? You have the PR solution, which is that you won. We know what you are. We see what you are. So what are you going to do now? Kill us all? That's kind of the broader question that I think you guys are going to have to ask yourselves. Pass more speech laws in America? Pull the Brigitte, start suing people? Demand that they're fired? The last thing is like, well, we control the courts. So we're just going to make all of you guys suffer. And we're just going to bankrupt you all. Yeah, we'll see about that. But I wanted to help you put two and two together of what's going on. And it's that you are what's going on. We can see you and we can see your behavior. And that is the leading cause for the sentiment, the worldwide sentiment that is against Israel at this moment. Special shout out, by the way, to all the Jewish people. There's one person that I follow who makes hilarious videos who did this whole series on Instagram, basically saying like when I was a kid, I always wondered why it was that we were told to visit Israel as a birthright. And now I see that this was always propaganda to make even Jewish Americans believe that we have to support this demonic nation. And yeah, that you should have recognized that when the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL, was caught on a hot mic saying that. Like, we got to do what we did. We're losing a generation. We've got to do something like we did with birthright. Yeah, that was a propaganda for Jewish Americans to tether you to an identity so that you couldn't see that you have nothing to do with this utterly demonic nation that's in the Middle East that no one should support. No person outside of Satan. Like if you're Satan, sure, I think you should probably support them. But if you're not Satan, you probably shouldn't. So that's all I want to say about that before I get into some of your comments. First, very quickly, want to remind you about American financing because costs are still rising on everything: gas, groceries, home repairs. If you're a homeowner, you've probably thought, should I call American financing to refinance and pay off this credit card debt? Then you maybe second guessed yourself because of that low mortgage rate that you're enjoying. Well, that low rate, it's not saving you if you're drowning in credit card interest of 25% or more. That's the math that you have to face. It's costing you thousands. And the truth is that if you're only making minimum payments, then that debt is going to follow you around for years. So that's why people are calling American financing, because they're saving customers an average of $800 a month by using their equity to finally break free from credit card debt. You owe it to your family to see what's possible. There's no upfront fees. There's no pressure. It costs you nothing to find out what you could be saving every month. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. So don't wait any longer. Call American Financing today at 800-795-1210. Again, that's 800-795-1210. Or visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. Again, that's americanfinancing.net/Owens. All right, you guys, what are you thinking in the comment section today? Let's see who we have. Not Always Sunny. Thank you so much for that contribution. They wrote, Candace, thank you so much for being a voice for the invisible and the forgotten. We appreciate you and your team's efforts, and we will continue to support you through their poor attempts at slandering your name. Yeah, I'm very comfortable with them calling me a bunch. I just couldn't care less about it because I think that people are awake, and that was best evidenced by all the comments under Jake Tapper's disastrous performance with Tom Clare. It was so ridiculous. She's deranged. She's deranged. What evidence do you have? Oh, we don't have any evidence, actually, that Brigitte was not Jean-Michel Trogneau. That's essentially what Tom Clare said. That's how I took it when he couldn't name anything that they supplied. Omran Hamoud writes, keep speaking up for the oppressed and most importantly, speaking truth. Yeah, it's not just me, it's everyone. Like I said, you use your voice when you comment. When you're in the comment section, you're hitting hard. That is, I feel like, I look at that and I'm like, I'm so grateful that so many people are defending me before I can even defend myself. It also puts them on notice to let them know that the propaganda doesn't work anymore. The propaganda does not work anymore. Whether it's CNN, whether it's Bill Ackman, the people are becoming more and more educated. I actually can't wait later on this week to tell you about this incredible conversation that I had with Grok. I want to debate with Grok. I just want you guys to know that. But it's important to talk about that because one element of this is that they're constantly wiping away history. And I believe that Grok and AI is a step in that direction because once they say that there's no evidence for this, for some reason people trust the computer response. They think it's like a calculator. And they don't think that, and actually it matters who's programming that calculator. And I have a stunning example of exactly how much like Grok will willfully ignore evidence that you're presenting to him if it's found in a book. And that's what they want. They want a generation of people who don't read books and don't remember books so that they can just delete information off of the web and then it never happened. And that's very scary to think about. Marzi writes, you should look at the French banks in Africa. They have been looting Mali for natural resources. Also, France was involved with abusing children there as well. Oh, I'm aware. They were ejected from 3 African countries in the last 6 years. Yep, I'm very aware of that. Like I said, Andre Gide, the self-admitted pederast. Oscar Wilde, pardon me, as well. They viewed it as you go down to Morocco and you can abuse Arab children and initiate yourself as a Freemason of sorts. We get into all that stuff in the book club. Jennifer Hofer writes, investigate Justin Trudeau. He destroyed Canada, as is Carney, but he's very close to Macron. There is something there. Of course there is something there. Of course there's something there. By the way, random, but my producer Skylar told me that he's dating Katy Perry now? What is this headline? Justin Trudeau, Katy Perry spotted dining together at high-end Montreal restaurant. Honestly, Katy Perry ain't been the same since she went to space. She ain't been the same. I just feel like she never really came down from that high of sorts. Nicola Rose writes, good evening and hello from London. I just got to say, I really hope your next Candace Cup and your shirt merch will be, quote, unimaginable firepower from Eric Dupont Moretti. That's right. That's what he said in his conspiracy about me. Then she started investigating this with unimaginable firepower. What do you mean? I had no firepower. The media called me crazy. I lost my job. I got kicked off of YouTube or demonetized on YouTube. What was the firepower? Oh, I know what it was. The truth, homie. The truth. You just keep saying it and eventually people wake up and recognize which version is the lie and which version is the truth. That would be funny. You are right. That would be the ultimate troll, as you say. Jerry writes, do you think President Trump will get involved if this becomes a state issue? You know what? I do want to say something about that. I think it's incumbent upon President Trump and more importantly, Vice President J.D. Vance to make a statement. Because don't you remember when J.D. Vance went over to Europe and he gave this banging speech? It was great. He was talking about how, your leaders have an issue with speech. I'm paraphrasing here. He sounded much more eloquent and brilliant when he said it, but he really stuck it to them. And he was like, you have, rather than listening to your constituents, you guys try to shut down their speech. You're trying to criminalize speech all across Europe. And we won't stand for that as partners. We won't stand for you guys doing that to your own constituents. Yeah, okay. Well, then what happened, J.D. Vance and Trump, was they're doing it to one of your constituents. Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte are trying to shut down the speech of one of your constituents. And you know that because they flew to the White House and they tried to get you to do it. So yeah, I think it's coming upon the White House to comment on the situation and say, this is crazy and that they have stepped over the line, but they haven't done that. Your silence is violence in this matter, J.D. Vance. Your silence will be taken as violence. Kay Castro writes, Brigitte actually makes me believe in toxic masculinity. Well done. I like that. That's very funny. I think we're going to have to use that. We have so much fun when we make our thumbnails. I like toxic masculinity as a future thumbnail when we discuss Brigitte. Anyways, you guys, it's all the time that we have for today. Tomorrow, I will be releasing an interesting conversation with Harvey Weinstein in the aftermath of everything, speaking about the courts and the court system, whether or not the court system is rigged, and if it is rigged, who is it rigged on behalf? On behalf of. Who is it rigged on behalf of? He had some very interesting answers, and so we will have that for you guys tomorrow. And yeah, that's it. We'll see you then.